Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here at the Metaland stage. My name is Alanah Lamb, and we're going to be talking about design for multiplayer mode. So the reason that I wanted to bring this up in design is because I feel like we have this tendency in Web3 to focus too much on the tooling, and I want to take it back and focus more on the relationships. The reason I care about this is I'm the founding designer at Future Primitive. We're an experimental venture studio building NFT and culture products. So for us, it's really important to get down and deep in the user journeys and care about, what kind of value we're providing for this industry that's not just more stuff. So I have two amazing designers in their own domains joining me today. I have Vivek and Josiah. If you both want to introduce yourselves.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Vivek Singh. I work on a project called Kernel, which is a peer learning environment that focuses relationships at the core of the program. So we bring together groups of about 200 people working in all different parts of Web3. And while there is a curriculum and a syllabus and strong perspectives on what we think is important to build and learn, the primary orientation in the program is peers learning from one another. And we found that that has led to a lot of opening in terms of what's possible.
Cool. My name is Josiah Tullis. I'm a product designer at a DAO tooling startup called Utopia Labs. Utopia is a sort of application layer built on top of Gnosis Safe that lets DAO operators conduct payroll, do recurring payments, and then also publish sort of financial transparency and insights to their community right from the app.
Cool, awesome. So to start, I want to introduce my idea of multiplayer mode. I started thinking about this while I was reading this book called How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell. I always plug this book anytime I can. She has this concept called context collapse, where the internet nowadays feels like an infinite doom scroll. It feels like you're in an apartment building with no walls, and people just don't know what to expect from their interactions. They're left feeling exploited, exhausted, and I believe that Web3 has the potential to rebuild those structures to create a more intentional and intimate internet that we want to be on and feels restorative. So I would like to ask both of you, how would you describe a multiplayer UX these days?
Sure. Jenny Odell is incredible. Aaliyah, who's in the audience, is a Kernel steward as well and has introduced me to her work. And she works, I think, at the Internet Archive, where there are others who talk a lot about trust. And I think in crypto circles, there's sometimes a suggestion that we now have moved into a post-trust environment, which we at Kernel find to be completely false. The reality is that we now have a bit more agency about where to put our trust, and we can think about in more critical ways how to protect those spaces. And there is a game on the internet called The Evolution of Trust by a man named Nicky Case, who makes the point that there are three main characteristics that help trust grow and maybe allow for multiplayer modes. And he suggests that it is repeat interactions amongst peers, the potential for win-win games, and the reduction of miscommunication. And I find all three of those to be healthy to think about in game building and game design and in general in Web3, to think about how you might foster trust spaces.
That's funny that Vivek brought up the evolution of trust, because I've also played that game, and Nicky Case's work and the entire blog has a lot of kind of applied game theory writing, which is super interesting and super relevant to Web3 and to Web3 communities. When I think about multiplayer mode within like a digital, like within a software application, I think it's mostly a sort of set of values that designers and others can bring to the space around kind of community ownership, transparency, sort of a lot of the values that Web3 and DAOs have latched onto. I think in a lot of ways we were lucky that this last super cycle bull run coincided with COVID, because people were at home, they were in front of their computer screens, they were longing for human interaction, longing for a sense of community. And it was harder to get that in the real world. So for the first time, they're looking for how can we create these digital places and digital spaces where we can, build relationships and try to make those relationships more rich than your sort of traditional internet friend relationship. And DAOs kind of came along right at the right moment, I think, to seize on that and to incorporate that as a set of values into Web3.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I want to follow up on that and ask, so you come from sort of a FANG, like more corporate Web 2 background. So how was it as a designer to move into Web 3 and design for the many needs of DAOs in this space? Because I feel like nowadays, Web 2, you had this consumer platform economy. You were kind of designing for your target markets, your personas, but now we sort of design for these collective organisms, these DAOs, these Discord communities that take on their own ideologies. They sort of move like a mass. And so what has that been like to design tooling for them?
Definitely. So I did spend the first 5 years of my career working in Web 2 corporate tech and kind of escaped the mothership and landed in the Web 3 world. And so I would say the values are very different jumping into Web 3, right? And it is community ownership. It is kind of you now are accountable not just to shareholders or to some board, but you're accountable to the entire community, and products can sort of be held up and held accountable at governance. And so there's more stakeholders than just kind of the business unit of some entity. It's the end user can actually also sort of be more of a stakeholder in the design process. The other thing I'll note, though, is there's a little bit of an idea that the practice of design in Web3 is dramatically different than it is in Web 2, and I don't think that's true. The design process is exactly the same. You're understanding humans, observing user behaviors, understanding their goals and motivations, and all of that remains true. It's just that what you value is different. We're no longer competing for human attention as our only monetization model. I've designed plenty of pop-up banners and even product experiences where we're competing for a user's attention from other teams on the same product, right? Notifications notoriously for large software products are one team competing to notify a user of something and another team also competing to notify a user, and basically pull engagement around the product to hit different teams' KPIs. And I think when I jumped into Web3, one of the principles we talk about a lot at Utopia that we wanted to bring to the software was this idea of calm tech, and human attention is no longer the end all be all. We can sort of have more creative monetization means, either through just tokens, but we also don't just have to have these large for-profit entities that kind of own these businesses or these products. And so for the first time, we can kind of put human attention aside and just serve people's needs.
Yeah, I really like that idea. I'm starting to think of design as a work of friction, being slow, thinking about user goals more than just conversions. I think everyone here is sick of the overly greased funnel, the one-click e-commerce. We don't need to have those things. We don't actually need to build for those things. We can reject those patterns and build for more psychologically supportive patterns. So Vivek, on that note, I want to ask how you build for more intimate communities, because I think user delight, all designers here, we know user delight. I feel like that's a primitive for something better, which could be, serendipity, intimacy, more rare human experiences that we can design through tokenomics and economies that don't just focus on transactions.
Yeah. The last word there, transaction, is an interesting one, because I think that the thing that has me excited about our project called Anoma, which is not something that I'm particularly tied to, is that they think about a layer one solution that's built upon intents. So in their model, instead of thinking just at the transaction layer, you can think about individuals in their L1 system being able to state their intents, state their preferences. And it's really interesting, is the first time I heard at layer one somebody saying, okay, transactions are interesting, that's a type of exchange between two people that enters in a particular type of economy, but intent is something that seems more native to communal space. It's where you could say that I intend to be this type of way within this quasi-economic environment. And I think that that point is basically this shift from funnels towards spaces. And maybe if we are no longer in user funnels, but spaces of people, and we think about the ways that relationships might be formed between those people as the highest measure of healthy growth, you end up with different outcomes. And so in Kernel, I think the thing that we are most interested in is if the people that are in the environment are able to build trust with one another. They talk about things that are related to their crypto learning journey. They talk about things that might go beyond that. They maybe end up at each other's weddings. If that happened, that would be a healthy measure of success. And it's also true that they could support each other in building token systems. And I think that you and the work at Future Primitive is really one of the star examples of that we speak about a lot in Kernel, because thinking about the actual token design is something that it protects the space, right? Like if it's not a funnel anymore, but it's a space, it doesn't need something to accelerate it down the funnel, but it does need something to protect it. And I wonder if there's anything that you guys have worked on that feels like it's in that category.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think like other companies that work on NFT projects, we've sort of struggled with finding the product market fit with having a good NFT and that NFT be enough for the market. You need utility beyond just getting this piece of artwork. There's almost like this augmented product that you have to build for. Your product doesn't just, begin and end when you mint. It's really the before, the after, the relationships. You're cultivating sort of a culture that really comes from that project. So one of the things that we're working on right now is called Token Bound. It's a new protocol that allows NFTs to work as smart contract wallets and effectively own other NFTs and tokens. And the ethos behind that was we were thinking that your wallet on-chain is sort of your identity, and people have started picking up these PFBs as their identities. G-Money, people on Twitter using them to really carry on their character. But that all ends when your NFT, gets abstracted through all these transactions and everything. So we started playing around with this idea of token bound, and now it's actually live. So it's EIP 6551, and we're playing with this idea of like what happens when you attach more, primitives of identity to something like an NFT where you used to own it, and now your NFT can own other things. You can interact with dApps as your NFT. We're actually here hacking at the hackathon with we made these bead lizards, where if you find anyone with a lizard, you can come up and tap our NFC chips and mint lizard NFT. And then subsequent taps, you'll mint beads. The reason we built this, it's actually a toy project of Token Bound. So if you want to learn more, come find one of us or somebody with a lizard and tap us. But we like to play with kind of silly examples of the technology. I hope that answered your question about that.
Definitely.
Did you call it a toy project of?
Yeah, it's
cool.
Literally a toy project.
Yeah. It's cool because we can actually do toy projects now, because it's not just this objective business need to just get ad dollars to things. Like a community can come in together, build a treasury, and do things just for fun or for play or for experiment, and build things you could not have built in more of a profit-driven business context all the time.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a really good topic, play. For all the designers out there, if you're thinking about how to soup up your roadmaps or user journeys, like think about how you can introduce play into your user journey. Like how do you get people to just be there with each other, be serendipitously connected? I'm biased. I love Kernel because I'm a part of the most recent block, Kernel 7. And I found that being able to be around other people working in the space, but in a playful manner, we're not all just talking about work. That was really transformative. And I think that's something that we can do within all of our projects, is getting people to connect, not just on their holdings, but themselves as people. So with that said, I want to move into this next topic. There's sort of this area of websites and design that I'm really interested in. it's sort of between poetic computing and effective computing, but people make these experimental sites that have no reason other than to share the collective human experience. And I think that's a really interesting use case for Web3 because you can actually be on the internet enjoying human experiences without feeling like you're going to be exploited because the site is powered by ads or, ultimately there's like a social login or something. So I want to ask both of you, what are some other applications of the future internet that you're excited about that move away from this extractive Web2 world?
Great question. I do think Web3 kind of made the internet fun again, and for a lot of people, reminds you of the internet like 10 or 15 years ago, right? Where the internet felt small, it felt smaller, it felt less corporate, frankly. And in a lot of ways, people are finding that again in Web3 with websites that exist just for fun, right? As opposed to always being some page on some huge app and some purpose of selling some ads or being an influencer of some kind or another. A Web3 experience that got me really excited and comes kind of back to the multiplayer mode question was PartyBid. Like when PartyBid dropped and had cursor presence where everyone was, collectively bidding on NFTs, but not just collectively bidding on NFTs, it felt like they were in the same room and they were in the same digital space. You could see their cursor the way you can see their cursor in Figma, There are a few other like Web3 experiences that I think are trying to bring that aspect of feeling like you're in the same digital space at the same time and you can kind of interact with each other in a digital way, but it becomes very multiplayer and you're having a shared human experience even if you're, across the country or across the world.
I love that. And I think that is a good example of what happens when you move from funnels to spaces. Because when you're looking at a space and a space maybe has thousands of people, but not millions of users, you're looking at a very different type of app that you're trying to build. You might be building something fun that makes 1,000 people's experience on the internet enjoyable. And if many of those home-cooked apps can be built, then you have this environment where it doesn't feel like you're being marketed to, right? It feels like you're just enjoying a space. There's a few examples. Versus.xyz is a fun one. On that site, there's some shape-shifting poetry. On Future Primitive's site, I think you see this playfulness. And I think that this is like the most exciting part of the next wave of application building is that you don't have to build it with thousands and thousands of faces in mind. You can say, no, this group of 1,000 people is in my environment. There are people that want to do specific types of things. And now I can slowly, perpetually grow that environment with a way that still technically pushes the ball forward. It changes your mindset completely as a designer.
Yeah, for sure. So for the last couple minutes, what are some practical advice we can give to people to make truly multiplayer experiences that we've just talked about here? So I think to start off, for one, I saw this thread going around on Twitter about community designers, which is this new role, sort of like prompt engineers. I've never heard of it before, but there are people that really focus on architecting your community design, how you onboard people, how you actually get them through your space, not your funnel. So that is one thing. Hire a community designer, get them looking at your product roadmap, and actually innovate not just for your minting experience or within your product, but everything before and after. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
I think a lot of that happens at events like this. Like crypto and Web3 are kind of fun in the sense that everyone gets to know each other online for months and months and months, and then connects for the first time in person with people you really feel like you have a deep relationship with. Or even for us, it's like our users of our product Utopia, meeting them for the first time and being able to kind of feel like you know them, but then have very human conversations about what's needed from the software. How can we improve it, and really feel like you're co-creating it kind of with the users as opposed to some super formal research practice and having to compensate people to do usability studies and stuff. Like really thinking of them as a stakeholder in the project, because often they actually are through token ownership.
I have one piece of writing that has been seminal in my experience of this, and I think that game design for all token designers is the category of research that defines the entire token ecosystem. If you look at game designers as the place to begin, you may be on a good track. So the name of the research paper is called Pro-Social Economics for Game Design. And it's by a bunch of incredible game designers. And they talk about 4 things that you might consider building into your games. They talk about friendship, the formation of healthy relationships. They talk about thriving individuals, thinking about how you yourself can feel healthy within an environment. Altruism, so the chance within the environment to help each other do interesting things. And then positive group norms, so an environment that helps these things propagate.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, thank you everybody for listening. And I want to leave you with just one more thing. Next time you're at the writer's room or the desk or the product room, think about how you can create a more psychologically supportive design that's going to give us a better internet. It's going to make us feel more like we're living in the digital gardens rather than the doom scroll viewport of today. Thanks all.